Hello and welcome, Nutrition 115 students. Welcome to Unit 23 or Chapter 23, Minerals. Good things to know about minerals. So let's talk about minerals. Now, before we do, I want you to think back to your chemistry courses and that periodic table. Now, some of the elements you see on that periodic table are considered minerals and are needed in trace amounts in the diets. Now, they're considered micronutrients, minerals are. Again, minerals are considered micronutrients, and they're considered micronutrients because we need them in small amounts daily, or trace amounts is another term for that. Now, some of your common metals on the periodic table are considered minerals and needed in the diet. For example, copper, zinc, and iron are needed in the diet. Other ones too that you might find are like magnesium, potassium as well, which those are considered a little bit more major because you need them still in small amounts, but a little bit more than zinc and copper. Now, there are neither animal nor vegetable in origin. They cannot be created or destroyed by living organisms. And they provide the raw materials for which all things on earth are made from. Now, minerals play important roles throughout the body. They are considered as to be essential, meaning your body cannot produce them in sufficient quantities or at all to maintain your health. So you have to eat them from the diet. I also want you to know that as far as the human body, minerals are involved in important catalytic reactions. Example, iron aids in gluconeogenesis, which is the making of glucose from amino acids. So again, referring back to that periodic table from chemistry, I highlighted here from your book in pink or red some of the elements that we need that are found in foods and are needed in the diet in trace amounts. All considered micronutrients, again, minerals like sodium, magnesium, calcium, potassium, copper, iron, zinc, selenium, phosphorus, chloride, and then a couple others as well. Now, some minerals are also considered electrolytes, which we'll talk about later, and they have either a positive or negative electrical charge, and because of that, they have certain important roles in the body in regards to not just the functioning of certain chemical reactions related to, like for instance, the nervous system, and muscular system as well, but also they have a lot of involvement in cell balance or osmosis. So a little bit more, their elements, again, like I explained. They have a huge role, not just in, regular human health, but also in sports performance. Minerals are crucial, you guys, for a variety of bodily functions and also keeping us healthy and strong. Now, if you're an athlete in here, just like other vitamins, minerals, and nutrients in general from foods, you will need more of certain minerals. For example, sodium, Na, has a positive charge. It is an anion. It's considered, it's involved and very important for muscular contraction and relaxation. So if you're an athlete in here and you have a high volume of training throughout your week, then you're contracting and relaxing your muscles more often than a sedentary person. So you will need more sodium than the layman's person or a regular person that's sedentary or just moderately active. 15 minerals are an essential part of our diets. 7 of the 15 essential minerals are required in trace amounts in the diet, meaning you have to eat them, so make sure you're getting them in your diet. Minerals are unlike the other essential nutrients that we learned in that they consist of single atoms, whereas we learned about proteins and carbs and fats, they are also essential. They're different from them in that sense that they consist of single atoms. Again, I'm digging back to that chemistry, those chemistry courses that you guys have had taken in the past. A single atom of a mineral typically carries a charge. Again, thinking back to the subatomic particles that these elements have, the electrons and protons, and how that affects whether they have a positive or negative charge. Now, if you hear of an anion, it means that it is an electrolyte with a positive charge, and a cation has a negative charge, for example, chloride. Now, I want you also to know that intake of several minerals, specifically electrolytes, has a great impact on our nervous system. I should say our neuromuscular system. Okay, and also if you're an athlete, it has a great importance on impact on sport performance. Sodium and potassium are the main electrolytes or minerals that are lost in sweat. So make sure you also take that into account. And sodium and potassium must be replaced on a daily basis, as well as during endurance and ultra endurance sports to optimize performance and prevent medical complications. So I just threw in that little bit of information for you for those of you that are athletes or that work with athletes or no athletes or have family members that are athletic. The charge makes the minerals reactive. Many of the functions of the minerals in the body are related to this property. Now, before we go on about charges a little bit more, again, they're inorganic. I want to mention that minerals are inorganic. They're not carbon containing, okay, because their elements are atoms. They contain no calories, and although they're essential, they are needed by the body, again, in very small amounts, specifically in milligrams and micrograms. That's what they're measured in. And after ingestion, I want you to know mineral structure is not altered. And unlike vitamins, they differ from vitamins that which can be destroyed or altered by exposure to heat, light, alkalinity, or enzymes. Minerals, they actually remain unaltered. And one more thing is because of their stability, minerals are unaffected by cooking techniques and digestive processes and or exposure to enzymes from our body, unlike the vitamins, the other macronutrients that we learned about and vitamins as well. Now, back to the electrical charge. Again, they can have a positive charge like sodium or a negative charge like chloride. Allows them to combine with other minerals of the opposite charge, and then they can form stable compounds that become part of bones, teeth, cartilage, and other tissues. For example, phosphorus is needed for bone health. People don't know that. But phosphorus is crucial, not just calcium and vitamin D, in bone development. The electrical current generated by charged minerals can be recorded by something called an electrocardiogram or an EKG or ECG. Okay. And here is a picture from your book. Here is a young man who has had an EKG device that has been attached near his heart and the rhythms that it projects, and it records a lot of the activity of the heart through these electrolytes. Let's see, I also want you to know a little bit further. I'll cover it a little bit more. Let's just get through this image. Getting a charge out of minerals. So minerals that perform the roles of cofactors are components of proteins and enzymes. Cofactors, if you're wondering what those are, they are individual minerals required for the activity of certain proteins. Okay, so when we build proteins, again, proteins can build things in the body, they can repair things in the body. It's needed for maintenance, growth, and development of our body. We require these minerals to help for the activity, the way that these certain proteins act in the body. Now, I want you to know that minerals must be absorbed across the intestinal wall in order to serve their roles within the body. And a variety of factors can affect the bioavailability of certain minerals. For example, some are absorbed in proportion to the body's needs. Absorption of others is affected by the fiber content of foods that are ingested simultaneously. Did you guys know ingesting a high amount of fiber, just in general, like having a high fiber diet, fiber can bind to zinc and iron, so it can deplete it from your body. So that's an example. Iron is needed for hemoglobin function and oxygen and carbon dioxide transport. So again, I talked about how a downside to a very high fiber diet, above 50 grams a day, can lead to the binding of iron in the body, which can deplete it. And we need iron in order to build a blood protein called hemoglobin, which functions in oxygen and carbon dioxide transport in our body. Zinc is needed to activate or is a structural component of more than 200 enzymes. So fiber can also bind to zinc as well. And as you see here, it's essential. It's needed to activate these structural components involved in lots of the plethora of enzymes in our body. Magnesium activates over 300 enzymes involved in the formation of energy and proteins. So think of these as activators or switches that turn on enzymes that are required to act upon things in order for us to receive the benefits of substances. Let's just review a little bit of the charge problems, the electrical charges, like in positive and negative charges, anions and cations. So because minerals tend to be reactive, they may combine with other substances in food to form highly stable compounds that are not easily absorbed. Zinc is abundant in whole grain products and is poorly absorbed because it is bound tightly to phytate or something called phytic acid in these whole grain products. In contrast, zinc in meats, however, is readily available because it is bound to protein, okay? Some people have asked, how do I get rid of the phytic acid when zinc is found in plant-based foods? And some foods can be cooked and it releases the phytic acid and unbinds the zinc to it a little bit. But again, it's just an example of charge problems and if they're found in animal origin foods or plant-based and how that differs. So again, I want to just let you know that a lot of the times we tend to think of the substances and nutrients in animal-based products are more bioavailable for the body, as you see here. However, as we're learning in nutrition, we do need plant-based diets and the 5 food groups in order for our bodies to function optimally, okay? So I know I mentioned that minerals are quite stable, but I do want you to know that when cooking your fruits and vegetables in water that contains certain minerals, they can be lost to the heating process of water. You can recover it and consume some of them by consuming the water that you cooked your vegetables in. A lot of actually cultures do this. Dried foods retain the minerals pretty well, but please know that the profile of dried foods can sometimes alter. They can be higher in sugar and preservatives at times with lower vitamin content as well. Okay. As you see here, your book says that calcium, and when it's canned, it loses 5% of its calcium content, and foods that are frozen lose about 5% of calcium, and so on. So as you see here, potassium and copper are lost quite a bit, just 10%, a little bit more than double when it's canned or frozen. Summary information for essential minerals. I want you to know there's a nice table in your book, 23.2. It shows an extensive course on essential minerals. Know the details, please, for calcium, iron, and sodium. So for those of you that are taking this course, you're like, there's so many minerals. I don't know how I'm going to remember all of them for the test. I do want you to know just specifically the details for calcium, iron, and so those 3 to make it a little more simple. Okay. About 99% of the 3 pounds of calcium in the body is located in the bones and teeth for strength. The remaining 1% is found in blood and other body fluids. So that's a little bit about the storage of calcium. Calcium in blood and other fluids is required for muscle contraction, nerve signals, and blood clotting. A lot of people think of calcium only as building bones, which is the main function, but we also need calcium. If you take my sports nutrition class, you'll learn that calcium is needed to contract muscles and send nerve signals for the nerve impulses to occur and be delivered to the muscle and to clot our blood as well, along with vitamin K. This calcium takes priority, so if blood levels are low, calcium will be released from the bone, okay? So it's important to maintain calcium levels in the blood, otherwise it will be depleted from your skeletal system. A little bit more about calcium. If you are aged 19 to 50 years old, so if you're for men and women aged 19 to 50 years, the recommendation, or the RDA, the recommended dietary allowance, is 1,000 milligrams per day. Daily recommendations are higher for men and women age 9 to 18 as well, as also for those older than 50 for women and 70 for men. Refer to table 7 at the table in your book. I do want you to know also that calcium is needed for disease prevention. We're finding that it also has a role in hypertension or high blood pressure and colon cancer as well. So it's also needed we're finding for disease prevention. A little bit more about the primer on bones. Bones are slightly flexible. They're living tissues infiltrated by blood vessels, nerves, and cells. Anytime you hear the word osteo, it means bone. So for instance, if you learned about an osteoblast, it's a new bone cell, a healthy bone cell, a new bone cell that is being made in the body. It's referring to a bone cell that again is being renewed or is new in the body, a healthy bone cell. If you've heard of osteoclast, it's another type of bone cell as well. But again, if you hear the word osteo, I'm referring to bones. The solid parts of bones consist of networks of strong protein fibers called the matrix. When we look at a bone, it has protein, and we call that network of strong protein fibers the matrix of the bone. Mineral crystals, again, calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, and carbon, these components and minerals make bones slightly flexible, very strong, and capable of absorbing shock as well. I also want you to know that calcium deficiency causes a number of complications. The body can usually manipulate calcium status by increasing calcium absorption from the intestines or even decreasing calcium excretion through the kidneys. If you've ever heard the term hypocalcemia or low blood calcium, it is uncommon, but it may occur in cases of malfunctioning kidneys or other disease states or disorders. And signs and symptoms of hypocalcemia include muscle spasms and convulsions. Okay. Teeth have the same properties as other bone, plus a harder outer covering called the enamel. Healthy bone versus bone affected by osteoporosis. So on the left side, we see a healthy matrix of a bone that is healthy. And then on the right side, you see a deteriorated bone matrix that you see as a result of osteoporosis. Now, if you've heard of osteomalacia, osteomalacia happens before osteoporosis. It's actually, we start to see the bones become brittle, but they haven't become so severe to the point where it affects your function severely. It's only the early stages, and then you can do a lot to reverse it and to retain a lot of the bone. So again, if you hear of osteomalacia, it means soft bones, and it's just the beginning of the softening of bones before it becomes osteoporosis. Now, I want you to know that even though hypocalcemia is rare and occurs mainly in disease states, calcium deficiency in the general population as well as with athletes is still one of the most common deficiencies in the United States. And again, this increases the risk for osteoporosis in the US population, knowing that fact. Bone formation and remodeling. So a little bit about how we make bones. Bones develop and mineralize throughout the first 2 to 3 decades of our life, so the first 30 years. They continue to increase in width and mineral content for approximately 10 more years. Peak bone density is reached between the ages of 30 to 35, a little probably more later in life than most of you thought of. Bones tend to demineralize with increasing age. Bones slowly and continually go through a repair and replacement process known as remodeling, and vitamin K is highly involved in that as well. Hip, the femur, neck, the wrist, the vertebrae lose most of the bone. If you're talking about what areas in our body tend to lose most of the bone as we age. Now, individuals in the US typically consume less than 50% of their daily calcium requirements, okay? Some signs and symptoms of calcium deficiency may include impaired muscle contractions and or muscle cramps. However, these symptoms are rare. Dowager's hump. So if you've ever heard of somebody with age who has this very severe hump on their spine due to osteoporosis, the effects of it, we call it a dowager's hump. And here is an example. And I've actually seen some worse cases in this old elderly lady that you see here, okay? I wouldn't consider her as that severe because, again, I've seen some people that are so highly humped and arched that their face is almost touching the ground. Osteoporosis is a disabling disease that reduces quality of life and dramatically increases the need for health care. And as we saw in the images, you can see that it's a condition characterized by porous bones due to the loss of minerals from the bones. 1 in 4 of women will develop osteoporosis, so women are at higher risk, especially when they hit menopause. Our menstrual cycles actually play a big part in bone development, so when we hit menopause, it increases the risk of osteoporosis. Caucasian, Hispanic, or Asian women have a higher risk of developing osteoporosis than African American women. And 1 in 8 men will develop osteoporosis. So men can still develop, it's just the risks are a little lower for them. And I want you to know that consuming the recommended daily intake of calcium and vitamin D and achieving at least 30 to 60 minutes of physical activity per day, including weight bearing and strength training activities, are lifestyle approaches that can be started at a young age to prevent poor bone health later in life. So here are some factors influencing the risk of osteoporosis. We spoke of a few, but age, physical activity, what you do and you don't do, genetic traits, diet quality, and your body size as well. And I would also say whether you are a male or a female. So here are some risk factors for osteoporosis, some that we already discussed. So if you're a female, especially of older age, and have hit menopause, having a poor overall diet where you don't consume enough green leafy vegetables, for example, are a good source of calcium. Dairy products, including milk, yogurt, cottage cheese, and hard cheeses, and some of the richest sources of calcium. Okay. If you smoke, if you're not active, and there's some genetic factors as well. It is noted that if you have osteoporosis in your family lineage, that you do have a risk factor as well. So what type of exercise is good for prevention? Maybe this is something you guys can investigate, but you will find that a lot of weight-bearing exercises are great for the development of new bone and strong bones. And it doesn't have to be heavy lifting. It can be as simple as using your own body weight as resistance. So the role of calcium and vitamin D in osteoporosis. I also wanted you to know that phosphorus is also a huge part of bone health. So it combines with calcium to form hydroxyapatite and calcium phosphate, which provide rigidity to bones and teeth. And so just want you to note that in addition to calcium and vitamin D, phosphorus is important. Bone mass before the age of 30 is increased by adequate dietary calcium intake and adequate vitamin D status. Vitamin D increases calcium absorption and deposition into bones. So I want you guys to know that vitamin D is considered a hormone-like vitamin, like I mentioned in the vitamin chapter, because of the fact that it initiates or signals to calcium to get into the bone or be deposited into the bones. Diets should include good sources of calcium, like I already mentioned before. A lot of your dairy products, including milk, yogurt, cottage cheese, and hard cheeses, are some of the richest. And if you don't prefer dairy products, green leafy vegetables are a good source of calcium. However, I want you to know that oxalates present in green vegetables bind to the calcium and may prevent its absorption, so it's better to cook them than eat them raw to release some of that oxalate. Now, if you're lactose intolerant, you can consume lactose-free products such as fortified plant-based products to meet your daily calcium needs, such as like almond milk, soy milk, even tofu is a good source of calcium as well. Soybeans, anything with soybeans. Low-fat yogurt, skim and soy, kale, and broccoli provide good amounts of calcium at a low-calorie cost, just to name a few. And this is straight from your book. I'm not going to go over it extensively. It's just showing you the caloric content and the calcium level and the percent of available calcium from different foods. And as you see here, they're not just in dairy products. Food sources of calcium regarding supplementation. However, I do want you to know that there is a upper tolerable limit for calcium. It can have toxic effects, but it's really, really rare. High intake of calcium can impair the absorption of other minerals. In some individuals, it can contribute to kidney stones. And then excess calcium can be deposited in organs and soft tissues and cause altered functions. Now, very high levels of calcium can also lead to cardiac arrest and death, but it's extremely rare in the U.S. Hypercalcemia is the term given, or high blood levels of calcium, can be caused by cancer or the overproduction of the parathyroid hormone, and is often signaled by fatigue, constipation, and lost appetite. So just a little bit of information regarding hypercalcemia or excessive calcium. You can also get excessive calcium from supplementation. So I always tell my students that when you supplement, there is a risk of toxicity if you're not monitoring what you're getting from the diet from a specific nutrient. However, like it says here, supplemental doses of calcium above the 2,000 milligrams per day, along with the vitamin D, is associated with excessive absorption of calcium. So here's another interaction, and it can lead to the deposition of calcium in blood vessels and soft tissues, like I mentioned, and an increased risk of developing kidney stones as well. We see some crystallized substances that end up as kidney stones. Health claims on food products that are good sources of calcium. So we talked about health claims, nutrient claims, structure function claims, and the FDA or the Food and Drug Administration does allow for manufacturers to make certain health claims on their products, whether it's regard to in marketing in order to signal or let the consumer know that it contains a nutrient like calcium that may help promote healthy bone structure or decrease, in this case, osteoporosis later in life. So a health claim, if you remember from the former chapter, a health claim is related to a disease. It tells about a nutrient, in this case calcium, and how it's related to a disease. So here it says regular exercise and a healthy diet with enough calcium help maintain good bone health and may reduce the risk of osteoporosis later in life. So if they wanted to make a commercial about their milk, this certain brand, whatever it may be, they can actually state this health claim. Now let's talk about iron, another mineral. Hemoglobin, you guys, is a blood protein. And hemoglobin is the iron-containing blood protein in red blood cells. Myoglobin, myo means muscle, so MYO means myo always refers to muscle. Myoglobin is the iron-containing protein in muscle cells. Most of the body's iron supply, 80% of it, is found in hemoglobin, so in the blood, in this blood protein that carries oxygen to our tissues. Small amounts are present in myoglobin. The role of iron in hemoglobin and myoglobin. So before I begin this, I want you to know that the recommended dietary allowance for men aged 19 to 50 years old and post-menopausal women is 8 milligrams per day. The RDA, or the recommended dietary allowance for females aged 19 to 50, is 18 milligrams per day. Now, the requirement for vegetarians are 1.8 or almost 2 times higher due to the lower bioavailability of iron from plant sources. I.e., if you're vegetarian, it's recommended you get 14 milligrams and 32 milligrams per day for men and women respectively, again, because the bioavailability is lower in plant sources. Now, if you want to increase your iron absorption from plant sources, for instance, like beans, we recommend you take in vitamin C. For example, if you have a black bean salad, maybe put in some slices of oranges or a cup of orange juice to increase the iron absorption. Functions of iron for health and performance. I want you to know it aids also in the formation of compounds essential for transporting and utilizing oxygen, like hemoglobin. Heme is the iron-containing portion of both hemoglobin and myoglobin. So iron readily combines with oxygen, a property which the body uses. In the lungs, oxygen attaches to the iron in the hemoglobin molecule in the red blood cells. Hemoglobin carries bright red oxygenated blood from the lungs to cells throughout the body so we can use them directly in the tissues. After releasing the oxygen, the free iron in the hemoglobin picks up carbon dioxide. So just a little bit about the process of how it's enabled in the body. And then carbon dioxide is a waste product of energy formation from the cell. So it's very important that we have that hemoglobin also to pick up that carbon dioxide. Now, because of this, iron is also said to play a role in healthy immune function and brain development, as well as energy production through its inclusion in also various enzymes as well. So it's also part of many various enzymes. So when carbon dioxide attaches to iron, blood turns from bright red to dark bluish red. Again, it's using that oxygenated component. Blood then circulates back to the lungs where carbon dioxide is released from the iron and exhaled into the air. So a lot of you didn't know that, but iron is needed for that process about how we get rid of carbon dioxide from our bodies, and it's released into the air. The free iron then attaches again to oxygen that enters the lungs and the cycle continues. So iron's role in carrying oxygen and carbon dioxide in the bloodstream, this is straight from your book. So the book is depicting here a little image of what we just went through, and it's circulating it. So how oxygen enters the lungs, then it attaches to iron and hemoglobin. Its oxygenated hemoglobin transports in blood to body cells. It drops off the oxygen to the tissues. And then the iron and hemoglobin pick up the carbon dioxide from the cells and transports it to the lungs. And then the lungs help release the carbon dioxide from the iron and hemoglobin, and then the carbon dioxide is exhaled from the lungs. Now, I also want you to know that some complications of iron deficiency. I want you to know that iron deficiency is one of the most common nutrient deficiencies worldwide, not just in the US. And iron is lost with the skin, hair, sweat, and the intestinal tract as well. Now, women, we lose significantly more iron than men due to the fact that we have those monthly iron losses through our menstruation. So sometimes some of us will complain about feeling more fatigued because we lose more iron, because we are losing more blood, especially if you have heavy periods. Iron deficiency is a big problem, like I just mentioned. It's a disorder that results from a depletion of iron stores in the body. It's a worldwide issue. The most widespread nutritional deficiency in both developing and developed countries. About 1 out of every 4 people in the world is iron deficient. Mostly affects very young children and women of childbearing age. So I might ask you in the exam, what are some of the most affected or high-risk populations as far as iron deficiencies? And there are very young children and women of childbearing age. Now this table is straight from your book. It is exhibiting some statistics here regarding incidence of iron deficiency. As we see here in developing countries, worldwide children under 5 years old, 51% are iron deficient and 12% in developed countries. So it's a huge difference, even though I said that it affects children worldwide and people worldwide. And I do also want to let you know that I worked with children 0 to 5 years old for about 10 years. And I found that that population is especially iron deficient as far as children, especially if they're low income as well. Now it says here, iron deficiency may also develop in people who have lost blood due to injury, surgery, ulcers, or if you donate blood more than 3 times a year. So make sure you take that into account if you're a big blood donor, okay? So people with iron deficiency feel weak, tired, colds, there may be hair loss, poor appetite, headaches, and are also susceptible to infection and illness more and become irritable and depressed as well. And again, notice that women lose more iron than men during those monthly menstrual cycles. So, give us a break. I also want you to know that there's 3 stages of iron deficiency. There's an iron depletion stage, an iron deficiency erythropoiesis phase, and an iron deficiency anemia phase. So anemia is obviously the worst phase. It's the last phase. And there are several types of anemia, and it is critical to diagnose the correct one to ensure that individuals receive the proper treatment. Okay, so make sure you go see the doctor for the type of iron deficiency that you have. Serious iron deficiency leads to iron deficiency anemia, like I just explained, in which hemoglobin content in red blood cells is reduced due to lack of iron. And again, it's characterized by the signs of iron deficiency, that plus pale appearance, easily exhausted, and even a rapid heart rate. So these are more extreme signs and symptoms when it becomes very extreme. So again, the recommended daily intake or the recommended daily allowance for men and women ages 19 to 50, 8 milligrams an iron a day for men and 18 milligrams a day for women. Small amounts of iron in most foods. Okay, so iron is abundant in most foods, but some of the richest sources of iron, for those of you that want to know, let's talk about two types of iron first. There's an iron called heme iron. Heme, it means blood. So as far as heme iron, it's only found in animal products such as beef, poultry, and fish. And it actually boasts, like I mentioned before, a greater bioavailability than non-heme iron, which is found in plants. Now, non-heme iron is primarily found in plant foods such as soy products, dried fruits, legumes, whole grains, fortified cereals, and green leafy vegetables. And like I explained before, the bioavailability of non-heme iron in those plant-based foods can be enhanced when sources are consumed with either a meat product or vitamin C source. Okay. And beans are pretty high in iron as well. That's part of the legumes subgroup. Only a few foods such as liver, beef, and prune juice are rich sources. Foods cooked in iron and stainless steel pans can also be a significant source of iron. So if you have like a cast iron pan, you can also increase the iron availability of your foods that way. Iron in most foods is tightly bound to a substance called phytates or oxalates, and mostly in those plant-based ones as well. So you'd have to cook them, or like I mentioned before, double your intake of iron. It's almost 2 times higher for vegetarians or vegans because of these substances in plants. Vitamin C increases the absorption, so you can also remedy that by not only doubling it, but also ingesting vitamin C as well. Absorption increases when body stores are low. Food sources of iron. So there's some food sources here from your book that are both plant-based and animal-based, and how much they have, and the average iron percent absorption. And as we see here, a lot of your animal products like fish, beef, and liver have a higher bioavailability or higher absorption rate than your non-plant ones, because of what we just explained, the oxalates and these other substances that bind the non-heme iron. So this is straight from your book, Iron Absorption versus Body Iron Stores. So at the bottom, we have body iron stores from low to high, and iron absorption percentage on the y-axis or the vertical axis. And it's depicting here that as iron absorption percent increases, so do the body iron stores as well in the body are higher. It's a direct correlation. Before I go into describing this image here, I do want to give you an example of a suggestion for an iron-rich meal or snack. So 2 cups of meat and bean chili, a whole wheat dinner roll, and 2 cups of spinach salad contains about 11.3 milligrams of iron. One more thing I forgot to mention is absorption, again, can be inhibited by calcium as well. So if you take supplements in here, try to separate your iron supplements from your calcium supplements, which is what I do. Because again, calcium can inhibit the absorption of iron. Also, the tannins in tea and the phytic acid in grains or excessive fiber can also inhibit iron absorption. Therefore, foods rich in these nutrients should be present in small amounts when consuming a good source of iron. Now, as you see here in this image, if you were 3 years old, can you tell which pills are candy and which are the iron supplements? Can you? A lot of times, a lot of supplementations are given colors, in order to depict a certain image or depict a certain emotion from the consumer. For example, when you think of iron, you think of blood, you think of rich, healthy blood. So sometimes the pills might be colored red in order to depict a certain emotion or an image for the consumer to entice them to buy it. A little bit more about supplementation as we go into toxicity, because usually when it happens, I want you to know that if someone is diagnosed with iron deficiency anemia, iron supplements are typically indicated. Normalizing iron status will improve our body's function, but just know that in addition to having supplements indicated, you will also have to alter your diet. Excess iron is not easily excreted, again, because it is a metal, if you learned about that in chemistry. And the way our body expels or gets rid of metals is not as efficient as other nutrients. Deposits in the liver, pancreas, and heart can be made if you overtake iron throughout a prolonged period of time. Damage that can cause liver disease, diabetes, and heart failure as well. And again, this is not present in the US. It's pretty rare. We can actually do better with iron, in fact, but I'm just depicting it can be toxic, just so you know. Hemochromatosis is the name given if you have an iron toxicity, and 1 in every 200 people in the US has an inherited tendency to absorb too much iron. Some people can also have liver damage due to, for instance, I had a patient one time who had hepatitis C, which affects the liver, and it was a severe case of hepatitis C. And the liver was damaged to a good extent. So in that case, I noticed she also had high iron levels in her blood, and her doctors were helping with her in order to decrease the iron levels. Because again, the liver is involved in how we process iron. So if it's damaged, we can have toxicity in our blood. Accidental overdose of supplements can be made as well, having iron toxicity or too much excessive iron. So let's move on to sodium. Sodium is an extremely reactive mineral. Occurs in nature in combination with other elements. It is the most common chemical partner of sodium is chloride. So also much of the sodium present on this planet is in the form of sodium chloride, otherwise known as our table salt. To function properly, I want you to know the body requires only approximately 500 milligrams of sodium per day, and probably more if you're an athlete. Now, the adequate intake for sodium is 1,500 milligrams per day if you are a healthy individual without any known chronic condition or disease. Now, functions of sodium for health and performance: it maintains blood pressure, and high intake is linked actually to high blood pressure. It is required for the transmission of nerve impulses, it's required for muscle contraction, and it aids in the absorption of glucose, the sugar, which makes it a key component of sports beverages designed to provide energy during exercise. Okay, it also serves as one of the body's electrolytes. It plays a role in any physiological function that requires the generation or conduction of electrical signals in the body. Lastly, I want you to know that sodium acts in conjunction with potassium and chloride to create concentration gradients that help maintain proper fluid balance throughout the body. So sodium is an extremely important major mineral. And I just explained what it does in the body, but I have some things in PowerPoint format. Again, they work together in the body to maintain normal water balance. The water balance is the ratio of the amount of water outside the cells to the amount of inside the cells. And the academic or scientific name for water outside the cells is extracellular fluid. And then the water found inside the cells is called interstitial fluid. Proper balance is needed for normal cell function. And again, high sodium intake upsets the water balance in your cells, causing the body to lose water in order to excrete excess sodium. High dietary sodium also contributes to high blood pressure or hypertension. So if you know someone with high blood pressure who's been diagnosed with that condition, they will automatically be asked from their diet to eliminate some of the sodium. A bit about blood pressure. So blood pressure levels less than 120 over 80 millimeters of mercury mmHg are considered normal. Also check with your doctor because I noticed in visiting different clinics they have slightly different numbers. Whereas levels between 120 over 80 through 139 over 89 millimeters of mercury are classified as pre-hypertension. Blood pressure of 140 over 90 millimeters of mercury and higher in adults under age of 60 is considered hypertension. If you're over 150 over 90 millimeters of mercury for adults age 60 and above, the presence of hypertension is actually substantially increases the risk of heart disease, kidney failure, heart attack, or stroke. So if you know someone that's been diagnosed with hypertension or this condition of high blood pressure, it also has a cascade effect on other functions and organs in the body, such as increasing the risk of heart disease, kidney failure, heart attack, or stroke. So it puts stress on the cardiovascular system and the renal system as well. I also want you to know that short-term sodium deficiency can be an issue for individuals who have prolonged diarrhea or vomiting or who are exercising for a very long time and have excessive sweat loss. So a little bit about the blood pressure test. As you saw in the former slide, it's expressed as two numbers. The top number is called a systolic. It's when higher pressure when the heart contracts, and we measure that through an artery. And the diastolic is the lower number, and it's the lower pressure when the heart is at rest. And if you are in the clinical field or studying too, it takes a lot of skill to be able to hear these certain sounds in order to detect, especially that lower number. I remember doing that in my physiology labs, and it took forever. It took quite a bit for me to learn how to detect that lower number. Hypertension categories. So we already went through these verbally, but please review these from your book. I might ask you on the test what is considered pre-hypertension in regards to the top number, which is called the systolic, or the lower number called the diastolic, or I might just ask you more in general what are ranges that are considered pre-hypertension or hypertension. So let's take a look at hypertension as far as data and how it affects certain populations and the cases regarding hypertension. So essential hypertension, which is called primary hypertension, is hypertension of no known cause, and about 90 to 95% of all cases account for this. Approximately 5 to 10% of hypertension is linked to a cause, such as diabetes or having kidney disease. Salt sensitivity is genetic, in which blood pressure rises when excessive sodium is consumed, which I feel that I might be one of those. And approximately 51% of people with hypertension and 26% of people with normal blood pressure are salt sensitive, and I think I fall into that category. Salt sensitivity is more common in African Americans, according to decades of research. Some research shows too that I want you to know that high sodium intake may lead to increased calcium excretion. So we're also talking about, in addition to hypertension, we often think about people that consume a lot of sodium. And I want you to know that another effect of having too much sodium in your body is, again, it can lead to calcium excretion and contributing to osteoporosis. So other nutrients are involved as well through this osteoporosis process. But just a little bit about osteoporosis, because we talked about it earlier in the calcium section. Okay, the upper limit for sodium is 2,300 milligrams a day. Athletes may have more than this, but they have to consult with a registered dietitian or sports nutritionist. Foods rich in sodium include salts. So a teaspoon of salt includes approximately 2,300 milligrams. Soy sauce, condiments, canned foods, processed foods, fast foods, smoked meats, salted snacks, and soups. I recommend, just for the healthiest way to get sodium, because it is essential, you need it for certain vital functions, is to sprinkle some salt over some nice wholesome fresh food. So for instance, if you cook chicken in here, like a chicken breast, if you grill it, maybe sprinkle in some sea salt in it instead of eating these highly processed and packaged foods. Risk factors for hypertension. So if you want to know what are some risk factors when you do a background history with your physician, age, genetic predisposition, they'll ask if your family has it, anyone in your family, if so who, high sodium, low potassium diets, obesity, physical inactivity, excessive alcohol consumption, smoking, and frequent stress and anxiety. Most children and adults in the US consume over twice the recommended amount of sodium. So this is one that we have to keep an eye on and decrease in our diet. Restricting the use of foods to which salt has been added is the most effective way to lower. And I just mentioned some in the former slides, but here are some from your book. So some of the major sources is these processed foods, which can include like deli meats and canned foods and packaged foods altogether. Fresh foods don't account for much. Salt added to the table, salt added during cooking and food. So again, the sodium source that is mainly coming from the American diet is these processed, these packaged foods, such as deli meats and canned foods. So this is straight from your book, but I want you guys to know that in general, sodium supplements are not required. Dietary sources of sodium are adequate, okay? Having a grilled cheese sandwich with a cup of tomato soup, for example, you can eat about 1,400 milligrams a day. You can get 1,400 milligrams of sodium a day from just a grilled cheese sandwich with a cup of tomato soup. For those of you that like a good winter or fall meal. Now this is straight from your book, The Effects of Processing on the Sodium Content in Food. So it's just depicting that when a food is processed, how it retains more sodium content in its profile. For example, fresh corn has nearly no sodium in milligrams, but when it's canned, it contains 200 milligrams. So it obtains it from being processed. And as you see here, cornflakes can have up to 900 milligrams of sodium a day. And when meat is processed into ham, it can have up to almost 1,200 milligrams a day, and so on, okay? How is hypertension treated? So how is this condition of high blood pressure treated? Dietary and lifestyle changes will be recommended and required through your healthcare team. The use of medications are going to be necessary, and some dietary and lifestyle changes can be reducing sodium in your diet, so reducing packaged foods, using less salt, physical activity as well. The use of medications can be necessary to control your high blood pressure for a while you get it down through exercise and diet. Weight loss and smoking cessation. So if you're overweight and you smoke, that will be recommended as well. A reduced sodium diet, eating more fresh fruits, vegetables, and whole grains, and eliminating a lot of packaged foods like deli meats and canned foods. Regular exercise. Again, we use sodium through the contraction of the heart, through the muscular system as well, and also we can lose it through sweat. Meditation and yoga, so also reducing your stress, because we learned that one factor that contributes to hypertension can be stress that is non-diet related. Moderate alcohol consumption if you consume alcohol. And then there is a diet that was created especially for clinical patients that have hypertension, and that's called the DASH diet. And it's based on vegetables, fruits, low-fat dairy products, whole grains, poultry like chicken, and fish. You can check that out, and you can actually Google that, and you'll get the direct website to it right away. It is a scientific-based diet for those with high blood pressure. Food product labels, again, they will also recommend that you read nutrition facts panel or food labels to make sure that you're reading how much sodium the food contains so you can choose lower sodium foods. Here you go. Here's the DASH diet approaches to stop hypertension. It emphasizes a diet rich in fruits and vegetables, whole grains, low-fat dairy, and lean proteins. And I just have an example here. You can actually download this DASH eating plan online as a PDF. The U.S. government actually provides this resource, and it's scientific based as well. So here are some common sodium claims on food product labels. So when you buy your foods out there, you might see some of these sodium claims. If you see the term low sodium, it means that the product must contain 140 milligrams or less of sodium per serving. For example, if you buy like a tomato soup, a canned tomato soup, and it has low sodium, it must contain per cup, if that's a serving size, 140 milligrams or less per cup. Now, if you see the term reduced sodium, it says that the product must contain 75% less sodium than the customary amount or the original version of it. So it means that it contains 75% less sodium than the original version of that food. Now, if it says sodium free, it means that the product must contain less than 5 milligrams of sodium per serving. So that one's going to be pretty low. If you see the term lightly salted, which I've seen in a lot of rice cakes that I buy, it says that the product must contain at least 25% less sodium than the customary or reference food. And again, that customary amount means compared to the original version of that food, it contains 25% less sodium. If you see the term unsalted or no salt added, it means that salt must not have been added to the foods customarily salted, such as canned green beans, popcorn, and peanuts. I would study these for your exam in case I give you a case scenario where like Sally or Joe bought a food product that contained low sodium and what that means, what that ensures that they're getting per serving.